Good afternoon to everyone. Hoping that this is coming through loud and clear. Welcome to Perry Johnson's BRC Global Standards Food Q&A session. So that we should be in good shape to carry on through. What we've done, now many of you have attended the initial food program webinar, and what we're going to do now is we've gathered a lot of the questions that have come in. Basic emails people have sent us. We've done a couple of public sessions and areas where we keep seeing the same questions coming up and up. So obviously there's tons of questions that we get that are fairly simple, straightforward. But what we wanted to do is really focus on, here are the ones that have come out loud and clear and give you a bit of a heads up. So this is, again, thanks to Perry Johnson to put this together. Great idea for it. And we're ready to go. So my name is John Kukoly. I'm the Americas Director for BRC Global Standards, working today with the good friends from Perry Johnson, and all of these slides will be available. If anyone would like them, just get in touch with Amy at Perry Johnson. She'll get you a copy of the slides. Any additional questions toward the end? I think most of you have been on a webinar before. You understand how it works. There is that chat function, so send a question in along there. I'm not going to be monitoring it. I'm not going to look at it till the very end. Amy will look at it if there's any technical issues, but any additional questions that you'd like answered, we'll hit towards the end. So we've got a nice little short, concise presentation for you, and away we go. So a lot of questions about supporting documents. When are they coming out? Where are they? How do I get them? The interpretation guide's been out there for some time. We now have posted the guide to key changes, that top right-hand one, and frequently asked questions. I think the key one is that guide to key changes. That's really a nice document people like to use. Now, you know how BRC works. Of course, anyone can go on the bookshop and purchase any of these, but anyone who is certified has access to BRC Participate. All of these documents, and I'm going to identify as many as I can that are relevant to this throughout this presentation, are available free to download as PDFs on Participate. So again, a reminder, anybody that is certified, does not have access, or anyone who would like to have access, send me an email or send inquiries at BRC Global Standards an email saying you need to get access to these documents on Participate, and we will set you up. That's part of, again, the service, the benefits that BRC certification wants to bring. So those documents are excellent. I always remind people on the interpretation guide, this is not, it can sometimes be written like more requirements. It's not. It's examples, it's opinions, it's discussion. It is not something that's auditable. We strongly remind auditors not to bring that as assess that as part of the audit. But it is a good document. We've got a lot of good feedback. It's not perfect, but it's got a lot of good information on there. The frequently asked questions, that's something that will likely be updated. And in addition, the other thing with Participate, don't forget, that's where we're going to land any position statements. Now, what happens, we publish the standard every 3 to 4 years. We never touch the standard. So once you've got a copy of the standard, it never changes. That being said, we've run into some issues. We haven't, we do a few trial audits, we try to see, but when you write something as comprehensive and detailed as the standard, on occasion you get things that just aren't working out that well. We do issue position statements on how requirements either change or are interpreted. Not many. I think there were 5 or 6 from the last issue. That's a typical number for us. So keep an eye on that from Participate. Make sure you're signed up, and you'll get notification in the news. You don't have to check every day. You'll get notification when you're signed up to our newsletter that, hey, there's a new position statement out. Make sure you take a look at it and keep yourself in place. So The next question about using or materials that are available are that word-based checklist. You know, it's a copy of all the requirements. It is now available. It's on. You can get it through the website. You can get it through Participate. It comes in multiple languages, so it's a great little document. We had in the past done an Excel spreadsheet. Great document. Loved it. Not something that we've continued on at this point. So this document is available. It's great for internal auditing. You can cut, paste, add because it is word-based. You're free to use and abuse that document as you want. So again, Participate, it's all yours. If for any reason you have trouble finding things on the website, on Participate, on the bookshop, anything like that, get in touch with us. Inquiry, I think most of you know how to get a hold of me, or inquiries at brcglobalstandards.com. More than happy to have our customer service team help you out to get what you need. A reminder, we always have, there's always the debate, can I go early, late, blah, blah, blah. No. First day of your audit. If the first day is before February 1st, you're version 7. If it's after, it's version 8. That's it. Because we switch over our database that we can't accept mixed for very long. It's a very manual process. So we keep it really tight, really concise on those dates. When's the next version coming out? 3.5 to 4 years. That is our standard, unless something critical comes out. So the nice thing is, as of February, we'll start seeing some results of the audit. We'll start seeing some, start getting those ideas. Do we need to put out any position papers? We'll start to see, the first 2 or 3 months worth of what are we getting nonconformities in. All of that will be presented at our conference in May. So that's something to keep in mind. There's going to be a real conversion to Food 8 focus at the conference. Part of the presentations will be based on that, and of course we're going to do some training courses the day before. So anybody that's interested in that, love to talk to you a little bit more about it. So some of the more detailed questions. Global markets, whatever happened to that? When it first, this is actually there was a name before global markets. It was an induction type program. Global markets. We didn't have a lot of utilization of it. That being said, we weren't convinced we had it right, so we didn't push hard to get that out in the market. We knew there were changes that we need to make. We need to work with a couple of industries to figure out. And what we've done is we've published it under the brand name START. So it's BRC Global Standards START for Food version 8. It's in a couple of languages right now. Obviously, as you can see, Spanish and Portuguese. And the reason we started with those, we have a couple of food service and one manufacturing brand owner who has come to us and said they need some help, specifically in Latin America, but in some other areas as well, with their supply chain. They have a number of suppliers who are either small, developing, or people they'd like to have as suppliers that are not certified yet, and it's not as they're just not as developed, they're not as mature, ready to get right into certification, but they wanted to have some oversight of them. So we've developed this program. It's now rolling out into Latin America. It's also going into India and some parts of Europe. It's available everywhere, but we've got a few projects where we're working with some brand owners to help manage their supply chain into this, and then hopefully most of them into certification. So it's a great little program. If you want to take a look at it, again, documentation is all available free for download on the bookshop. Basically checklist, the standard itself, how it breaks down auditor requirements, audit requirements. And again, if anybody needs a little help with their supply chain, this is something we could certainly talk to you about, or if you've got some developing parts of your organization or suppliers, that's it. So yes, the answer to that question, effectively global market stays. It's just renamed under STAR. It meets it's the equivalent of the GFSI program. So obviously, a lot of questions about how food safety culture will be audited around 112. So what we're doing on this, the clause requires them to implement a plan for development of continuous improvement of their food safety culture. So remember I talked about position statements. In the first year of the Issue 8 standard, sites would be expected to develop the action plan to improve food safety and quality culture and demonstrate those plans have started to be implemented. At their first audit against 8, evidence of effectiveness is not going to be expected. So if you look at 112, there's 3 bullet points. One is you start to measure the culture, you take a look at it, and you measure the effectiveness. We don't expect an effectiveness measure in year 1. Of course, the maturity of your program, it depends on exactly when your audit comes in, but we realize that a culture development program is something that may take a significant amount of time, multiple years even. So we're not looking to force people to rush in and get it all done in a couple of months to get ready for the audit. It's about your culture. It's not about the audit. So it will be, how effective it is, we're not worried about the first year. Remember again, auditors are not giving you a grade on your culture. Your culture is good or bad, we don't care. It's really about, have you got a plan, the system, do you understand it? Have you got a plan to measure based on the measurements? What are your corrective actions and improvements? And then that continuous plan, do, check, act cycle afterwards. So how will it be audited? The auditor will do a number of interviews with the senior management. They will do interviews with the staff. They'll want to see what kind of program you've chosen. The auditor does not care what program you've chosen or what mechanism you use, as long as it is appropriate, it looks like it'll work. And then, year 2, year 3, what are the results? What are the improvements? What are the iterations we're going through? So how will it be audited? Primarily discussion, primarily first year with the senior leadership, later on more with the staff and seeing the impact and the results. So it's going to be really a layout of your plan. Kind of like the beginning of the year, what's setting your objectives, that's what we expect to see during the audit when it comes to food safety culture. A lot of questions around internal audit, and usually 2 parts. Do we have to audit the entire standard 4 times a year? No. And again, when we wrote the standard, we thought long and hard about how to write this. We're crazy about what we came up with, but couldn't come up with anything better. Effectively, my recommendation is take that 4 times per year. Look at it more like a minimum of 4 events per year. I would say, my recommendation is do more than that as you break down your audit, your internal audit program. Internal auditing is a huge, I can't say enough about the value of internal auditing. And again, you're not alone. Where do you go? You go to BRC Participate. That best practice guideline, that's one of our best documents. That thing is old. We've had it around forever, but internal auditing's been around forever. You did get it right, and you don't have to really update it. So if there's a couple of references to the standard, they're not going to be right, but the rest of it, great material. That auditing technique guideline, it really was written for the BRC auditors that are coming in, that work for the certification bodies. There's some good stuff in there as well. And again, so same with that document below, that auditing techniques guideline is what it looks like in there. So it's great documents. Again, these are free tools for you. So by all means, get on there, get them downloaded, take a look. What else do you do on your weekends, right, other than get ready for your audit? How do seasonal or intermittent operations work when it comes to that 4 times per year? Again, like I said, it's not every 3 months you do a quarter of the standard. You want to have several activities throughout the year. Seasonal operations, most of them, they've got some things ongoing like maintenance, training in the off season, so that's how you're going to divide those events per year. You may have some that it's very, very short season operations, things like some of the fish processors where your season is 2 weeks, week and a half, 3 weeks long. We realize that production is king, and you cannot take days out of production to do internal auditing. So when you build your internal audit plan, you really want to assess, what do I need to look at during production? What can I do mock production to assess versus what can I do completely outside of, independent of the production? For example, testing all of your staff on checking the metal detector. Technically, you don't have to be running production other than having some product to run through. doing an internal audit on that, and I'm making sure that they understand the process involved and around it. That's something that can be easily done outside of actual production. So answering the questions, multiple events per year, at least 4 independent internal audit events, not necessarily duplicating, although you can do the same thing every 4 times a year, as long as well throughout the year you're covering the standard. This is getting into some real detail. 525 talks about validation of cook instructions and that usual question about the microwave. We get it. That's a tough one. Again, I'm going to point you to participate. There is a technical document which covers many of the challenges associated with the validation of cooking instructions. It was produced by Camden BRC. It is a British research institute, great institute, and again, I would look at that. So, understandably, if microwaves are a kill step, that's a huge challenge for you because age, power. How the product goes in, the state it goes in, whether it's completely frozen, how frozen is frozen, partially thawed. There are so many challenges around microwaves at a kill step, but typically you're going to do your validation based on worst case scenario. That's essentially how it has to be done. So we don't often see a lot of cook from raw microwave instructions. More and more products that are going out par cooked or microwavable are literally ready to eat, treated that way, and produced in that environment. That's the key. It's regardless of cooking instructions. If you're going out your safety step is it's a ready to eat production or product, you have to stage everything and segregate everything as if it is like that. This one has been an ongoing debate. We think we've got it clarified with our auditors. I'm not going to promise you every single one is got the message, but we have a requirement of the site. The site, have to do a traceability challenge once a year. If you make additional claims, you have to do 2 a year. I don't care if you make 1 claim or 100 claims, you have to do 2 a year. If you organic, kosher, halal, regional sourcing, varietal, any claim, we don't care what it is. If you're making a claim, you do it twice per year. But for example, if as part of your organic certification audit, they do a traceability challenge that fits the model during that audit, there's 1, you do a second one. So you can't count last year's BRC audit. That's the only caveat we're going to put in there. But the facility has to run. Now, again, be cautious. There are times where 2 may not be enough for you, and that's not the requirement of the standard. That 2 a year max covers the standard. If you've got some really oddball supply chains or ingredients that aren't atypical supply chains, you may want the comfort of doing additional. That's up to you. Again, it's kind of like if your exercise routine says do 10 repetitions and you on some things you want to do 12, you're not breaking any rules. So it's twice a year maximum, regardless of how many claims there are. What are some of the options for cultural food safety culture assessments? There's a ton. I mean, you Google food safety culture, you'll probably get 4 or 5 really good ones. There are a number. Most certification bodies offer some form. A number of independent companies offer some form. Here's the key. Now, there is a wide range in what they are, from the very simple, straightforward, and very inexpensive to the extremely expensive and extremely complicated and extremely potentially quite good. It's very much, again, like choosing a gym. It's not how much it's January, right? New year, we can use working out as a great example. It's not how much you pay or which gym you choose. It's the dedication you put into doing it. So the key indicator or the key driver of the effectiveness and value of the program you choose is how well committed senior leadership is, which by definition is, the beginning of a good culture for an organization. So we don't have a preference. I will state that very clearly. Yes, BRC does have one, and you see the example there. You can now, each individual site can now just go on the bookshop and buy a license to it. So you can go to brcbookshop.com, type in culture, say buy one site, and then we'll get in touch with you. It's not as simple as you get a package and you take the test and you're done. But we wanted to streamline that process because we've had so much demand, and the previous process was a little complicated. So one option, it is fairly simple, straightforward, but again, it depends what you do with the results. It's going to give you some indicators, and then it's up to you to decide. That gets you through year one. When you start looking at that's the plan, do, check. Now you have to act. Here's our indicators. So what do we do? And that's where sometimes a little bit of more knowledgeable help or more expenses is to be encouraged to get a little more value out of it. But number of different assessments. Frank Yanis, new FDA commissioner, he's had a hand in a number of them, as have a number of other individuals. And I've looked at a number of them. I think they're all quite valuable, quite useful for an organization. The employee reporting mechanism we've had, this has been a real wild one where everyone has had a lot of questions. You can absolutely go to a professional third-party reporting system, anonymous, very much like your employee helpline, completely anonymized, just take information, completely independent from the organization. That's fine. You can have someone or a group within your corporate headquarters answer that. It could be email, it could be phone, and then they just, okay, this is what's plant A and plant B. We're going to separate the anything that's come in from either of those and send them to the plant. We expect it to be acted on locally, so site senior leadership is responsible for it, but how it gets there, we're not that crucial about. A lot of people are going with the suggestion box. Let's face it, that's completely anonymous. It works. It's optional, but you can use it through a more public town hall type meeting. You can simply have a employee line at yourbusiness.com. You can simply leave an extension in your telephone system for people to leave messages. As long as you're acting on it, someone has to be assigned to looking at that, recording it, assessing it, making decisions about it. That has to go to senior management. So any real number, the level of I strongly recommend some of the ones that maintain the best confidentiality. So an email thing, the suggestion box, a phone system. And make it clear, if you're going to put a phone system, let's make sure that it doesn't have traceability on it, so that we can't tell what number came in on it. Keep it simple, I think, is the biggest key. Don't go through a big complicated mechanism. Remember what this is for. This is giving every employee the ability to speak out without fear of repercussion. Simply having, I would imagine the vast majority of facilities who put this in place will never get anything on it. So you got to remember, come from that perspective. Because in most organizations, people feel quite comfortable in speaking up. I've worked in industry quite some time and never had an issue with people speaking up and speaking their mind if they were concerned about the product or something that was going on about that, and be quite vocal. So it has to be there just in case. But don't expect it to be a wildly successful thing that's going to bring you tons of input. The key, I think, with this is going to be getting that information to the staff, and that's getting them to understand why, how, what it's for, and we're going to touch on that a little bit later. What about GFSI benchmarking? Everybody asks this. It happens every version to every standard. GFSI has a mechanism in place. So we put version 7 in. It was formally benchmarked. When version 8 is published, we sent a note to GFSI to say, here are the changes. This is our explanation as to how or why it impacts that benchmarking. Effectively, there's continuity. version 8 is by default benchmarked because version 7 was, and we have not made any changes that impact the benchmarking requirements. So by looking at it that way, and GFSI has realized they've had to do this for the standards. They've got 11 standards now. If you look on farm and off farm, they would continually be falling out of recognition and having to re-benchmark for no great reason. So yes, by GFSI definition, version 8 is by default benchmarked. Senior management have to be present for during what we've said is we expect senior management to be much more involved in the audit. Do they have to be present during the entire audit? No, they don't have to be present during the entire audit. Usually you don't want them present. We understand that they've got other things to do. Should they practice for the audit? Absolutely. Everybody should practice for the audit. Should be challenged, should be ready to go. Define senior leadership. The people that make the decisions on what we spend money on next year for the facility that are at the facility. Now you could have corporate involved in it, usually not. It's usually the most senior decision-making person at the site. And what kind of things will senior leadership be asked during the audit? And this is more important. Absolutely. Describe your culture program. Why did you choose that one? Where do you see it going? What have you done so far? How is it being received? So there will be a lot of questions about that. What are your objectives? How did you set them? Why? Are they the right ones? How do they link to your business KPIs and your performance of your facility within the organization? Can you tell me about the root cause analysis of last year's nonconformities? Site senior management's responsible for that. I would certainly, as an auditor, be asking them to do that. Tell me about the structure or your org chart. Why did you do it this way? What benefits does it have? What continuous improvement programs have you got in place? What can let's talk about that whole review. What are the outcomes? What kind of inputs? Do you feel it's valuable? How frequently? Who attends? How do you make up for people that didn't attend? So primarily questions about culture and objectives. A lot of that's driven out of the review process, and then those little bits and pieces. Best recommendation, give a digital copy of the standard to senior leadership. Tell them you Google senior leadership or senior or whatever you want in it. You find those requirements, and then we'll talk about it. So put them to work at it. You got that digital copy, put it to use. Same basic idea. What will the employees be asked, and should they practice? And how should they practice? Absolutely, they should practice. You should practice. Every employee in your facility should be, and this is where I'm cautious. You don't practice to pass the audit. You practice so that they are the best they can be at their job and as a member of the organization, and as a result, they will deliver very well during an audit. How can you practice? That's an easy one. We're going to go right back to where we were earlier, and that's the internal audits. So part of your internal auditing should always be, so instead of calling it audit practice, you call it internal auditing, of which we'd have at least 4 events per year, remember? And you make sure you have numerous employee interviews, overdo the employee interviews, and explain why. Not just, I'm doing an internal audit. Some of these, you may be able to participate in the actual certification audit, which would be great. We just want to make sure that you're comfortable with the expectations we have of you in your job. Talk about where where your culture assessment and development program is. Maybe some talk about benefits. Remember, it's not, when you do an internal audit interview of an employee, it's not a interrogation. It can also be part of their ongoing training and improvement. So explaining why we do certain things is important. How has senior management demonstrated their leadership, their commitment to the culture, commitment to the organization? What is the culture program that you've got in place? And then the very specific things. What's your role when it comes to pest control? What would you do if you saw this type of pest? What's the process you would follow? Same thing for site security. If you saw someone who wasn't supposed to be here, didn't have the badge, didn't have the red coat or whatever you give for visitors, what would you do? What's your role with that? Because everyone in the facility has a role to play in those two areas. What is your personal role when it comes to food safety? What is it you do? How do you protect a product? What do you do? You know, what would cause you to stand up and say, wait a minute, this isn't quite right? What would you notice? What could go wrong that would be within your realm of responsibility to act on? Tell me about your job. How do you do it? How are you trained? How often do they check to make sure that you're doing it well? Where do you record it? What happens if, and then all of the what happens if questions. And then the basics. When did you start? How were you trained when you began? What kind of ongoing refresher training? How do they assess if you need more training? Those types of questions. All tied together, right? The involvement of your internal auditors, which could be numerous people throughout the organization, including your line leaders, your supervisors, your managers. All of them can have a role to play in this. It enhances your internal audit program. We're going to train them. The more people we have doing this, the easier it is to maintain that independence requirement for internal auditing. And having these conversations helps everybody, educates everybody, and yeah, it improves the culture. So, it is just it's a big wheel, and it just keeps going round and round. And the more you do some things like this, the better other things are, which reflect better on this, and it just keeps getting better. In this version of the standard, we started using the term primary packaging. The number one thing you have to do is remind yourself BRC's got a special definition. High risk, everybody's got a definition of high risk. BRC has their own. BRC has their own of primary packaging. Typically, we define it as the unit of sale. Secondarily, it's defined by whatever the customer brings into their area of use. So if it's a consumer, what do they bring into the kitchen or into their household? If it's a business to business, what do they bring into the production area? Not what's in the warehouse, what goes into the production area. What is a unit? So if it's a drum, it's the drum, the lid, the liner, the band, the label on the outside. Not the pallet, not the shrink, not the band that holds 4 drums together. If it's a chocolate bar, it's not the case, it's not the shipper, it's generally the wrapper, the liner. That's usually it, 2 pieces for a chocolate bar. But before, don't drive yourself crazy on defining that. Don't worry about it. It's easier to go more than less, and this is why. If you look at, again, use your digital copy, Google or find in the thing the word primary, and you'll see why it matters. Look at what we say about it. What we say is, you've got a risk-based supplier approval program for primary packaging. Primary packaging suppliers have to have traceability. You have to have traceability. You have to have a receiving procedure. That is your ongoing verification of suppliers, and you have to have a specification. And you think about that, and you say, well, gee, I got specifications for pretty much all my packaging. I've got a risk-based supplier approval program for all my packaging, with the exception probably of things like shrink and pallets, and a lot of people are now putting them in there because it's so simple. Having my suppliers have traceability is usually pretty easy, because more and more of them are getting some type of certification program that includes a traceability component. On-site traceability can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge for some sites, especially extremely manual sites, but you know what, it's just time to get over that. It's not hard to do. It's not hard to do packaging traceability, even things like film, because you can go, if your supplier knows what lot they sent you on each receipt, all you need to do is assign a receiving code to each group you get, and now you've got by default traceability as long as you record the receiving code on your production use. So it's certainly possible. It's not that hard. I know in past it has been a little bit of a challenge, especially when you do a lot of little lots of packaging, but it's getting easier and easier these days. So primary packaging, very simple. It's the unit of sale, what people take into their area of use. Don't worry about arguing that part. Look at why we're asking that and what you have to do for primary packaging. When when are specifications and traceability useful? Most times. So gosh, I may even put more than just primary packaging in and get it done. So it's not defining it, it's what you do about the stuff that falls into the definition that's important. Supplier audits and proof of acceptance. This is always a challenge. So I've got 200 suppliers. Theoretically, they've all got a GFSI benchmark certification. How the heck do I track this? Number one is simply having a supplier tell you I'm certified obviously doesn't cut it. Having them send you some digital form, either a copy of a certificate or a audit report. It's okay, especially domestically. Foreign, not so much. Looking at, verifying that the scope of the audit covers what you're buying from them is hugely important. There is a mismatch on a lot of that. So you really, just getting a copy of a certificate, A, it's not the best. B, it means, if you've got 200 suppliers, 200 times a year, you have to chase suppliers for a copy of their certificate. We're getting to a point where some digital tracking options for supplier documentation is getting, there are some nice simple ones. There's some big, robust, complicated ones, and if it works for you, go for it, if that's what you're doing. There are also some very simple, inexpensive ones. Let's face it, you want somewhere where you can attach some kind of digital proof and then a trigger to say, oop, I need to go get a new one because the old one expired, so I don't have a bunch of expired ones on there. You don't need a real complicated system, but looking into it. Don't forget, I think most of the manufacturing GFSI programs have a directory, the BRC directory, right? Anybody that says I'm BRC certified, you can go in there, look them up on the directory publicly, done, verified, I'm good. SQF has the same. IFS has it. You have to ask for access though. It's a little bit more complicated. FSSC has some form of one. So verifying on the database, that's getting to be de rigueur, what more and more people are doing. Next step further, BRC, I believe SQF, you can check with them. I don't know. I'm not gonna oversell their program. We're more than willing to set you up almost a LinkedIn kind, Facebook, LinkedIn kind of system on our directory. It's very easy to do. So you simply say, you simply email out to you basically friend or like your suppliers, and they friend or like you, and what they're doing is they're saying, yes, I'm giving you a data feed from my certification. So I'll ping you they'll ping you if they lose the certification, when their next audit report is up. It's a great little connection. It's all free. It's all automated. Very simple for you to do. And with our new directory, which is coming out, we've got bits and pieces launching as we speak. We'll be fully out this summer. There is a package, a very inexpensive, simple package for you to get for supply chain monitoring. It's a great little digital solution for you. So anybody that would like to hear some information, so you get access to this supplier friending connection regardless. You want to do it, get in touch, inquiries at brcglobalstandards.com. We'll set you up on that. Secondarily, if you want to get some information on that digital solution for supplier management, and not just BRC certification, but any certification or data proof can go on this for quite a large number of suppliers in the basic package. Get sales or inquiries, shout, and we'll get some information to you. So back to the original question, what do I need for proof and acceptance? A emailed copy of a certificate, less and less acceptance of that, especially for, you almost have to do a risk-based supplier assessment of what it is. So when you say, if I'm buying dairy powder from China, yes, they have to have a certificate, but in addition to that, I need to, I'm going to go on and verify all of these things, or get some additional and do some testing. So a digital copy of the certificate alone may not be sufficient. Environmental monitoring. Can I risk assess my way out of it? No, you can't risk assess your way out of a environmental monitoring program. I'm not ready to eat. Do I need one? I don't know. Does your product ever spoil? Do you ever have any losses or complaints based on remembering that it's not just pathogen contamination, it's also spoilage organisms we need to look at. So you don't ask BRC, you don't ask the auditor, you ask your product expert, which is you. Am I worried about microbial environmental impact on my product? If the answer is yes, then yeah, you have some form of a monitoring program. If you're not ready to eat and there is no risk of microbial environmental impact on your product, then the answer would be no. Why did we add this to the standard? Wait till version 8. It's always kind of been there. The expectation is it's been part of your HACCP process risk assessment, identifying that certainly pathogenic environmental contamination was a risk and you'd have a mitigation strategy. More and more recalls around the world are being driven out of this, so we just wanted to make it much cleaner, much more obvious, much more concise what we're looking at, and it allowed us to be clear about adding the spoilage in, so you're really protecting your product. My product will not support pathogens. Do I need a program? We've heard this many, 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 many times. Remember, spoilage and pathogens. There are a couple. I mean, there are absolutely a couple. My recommend, if you're making vinegar, yeah, you're going to have a document that shows vinegar will not support the growth of spoilage or pathogen organisms. Evidentiary proof, in which case, let's move on. Short of that, there are very, very, very few ingredients where there are neither quality or pathogen risk organisms about that. And the other example we always get is, I'm a thermal processor, I'm a canner. Do I really need it? Well, yes, you do. For two reasons. One, the weaker argument is your load going into that can, your thermal process is built on an expected load, and if you're far exceeding that load, potentially your thermal process may not be sufficient. But those of you who have worked in canning operations know it's the exit of the canning, the cooker, the final cool stage where the seam is not necessarily fully intact or may still have some porosity. That area would certainly have an environmental monitoring program, if nowhere else. So yeah, don't focus on how do I get out of it. Focus on what's the best I can do in this without overdoing it. Section 421, TACCP compared to what 421 is. Remember, TACCP is a threat analysis, critical control points. TACCP generally doesn't look at internal threats, and that's been the change in version 8. We want to look at the risks of both external and internal threats. It also looks product, process, and brand. So it's not just, threat assessment. What can somebody come in, and the similar question about food defense, is TACCP food defense and 421 all the same? Not really. Food defense is generally mostly focused on how do we protect the product from being manipulated in such a way that it becomes an agent of harm. So that's the traditional food defense program. 421, really, we want to cover it all, right? Internal and external threats. We want to make sure that the product is safe, the consumers of the product are safe, but also our brand and our premise is safe. So even, basic theft falls under 421, and that is an important thing to managing our business. So it's 421 tends to encompass all plus is the best way to look at it. Do I have to take a conversion course? Nope, you do not. We've never required you to take a BRC specific course. That being said, those of you who have not looked into the BRC professional program, I strongly urge that you do. It's a really cool program. We're getting a lot of positive feedback, both from people who have BRC certified suppliers, as well as people that are taking it. As a matter of fact, I will give the story. Our very first BRC professional, someone I had the pleasure of being able to award in person their certification to, from becoming a professional within 4 months. He got a significant promotion at work, and he brought the program to his staff, which is, so to say, great on you, great work. It is something that's being recognized. I have now seen as well a number of job postings where BRC professional is a preferred credential. So, it's something to certainly consider. If you want the conversion course, talk to the folks at Perry Johnson. We are having a few courses in conjunction with our conference. Remember, I mentioned that right in the beginning. It's going to be in Coronado Bay, San Diego in May. Love to have you. Matter of fact, I had a discussion with someone on this one this morning, and this is, the supplier approval recommendation requirement, where if you are buying from a distributor, and the distributor not being willing to share the source details. This is a tough one because we still on occasion hear it. We're talking about 3515. Where it says, if you're buying from a broker distributor, the source of the materials have to be known. For those of you in the U.S., for everyone in the U.S., obviously that's a regulation now, so you're not allowed to buy from a distributor who would not tell you who the source is. In Canada, Safe Harbor Canadians Act, it leans that way. It's not quite as definitive about it. The BRC is very definitive. You will know, if you're buying from a broker, you will know the source. It is a somewhat longer process. So step one is have the discussion with the broker. You're not buying because you don't know where else to get it. There's this neat thing since the 90s called Google that you can find stuff on. If you were buying any commodity, you can go on the internet and you can find it. You don't need a broker to do that for you. You've got a broker because they give you a lot of service, minimum order quantities. They're product experts. They know how to get best pricing. They can get better pricing than you do, service. All of these great things that we rely on most of our brokers for are why we go to brokers. We would never want to bypass, because it's not that we don't know who the supplier is. So from the standard, yes. So step one is you're going to have to educate, inform, let them know. Step two, if they do not say, if they say no, we're not going to do it, you're going to have to inform them we need to look for a new one and start looking for an alternate supply source. In the meantime, we'll invoke 3517, which is effectively, it's what we used to call the emergency supply contingency. Basically, we don't know where this product came from, so we have to treat it as unapproved regardless of what they say, until we can find an approved source. So that's the direction you have to go on that. We always get this question on a number of things. Can we do a risk assessment to exclude this requirement? No, you can't. There are a couple of really, really obvious ones, like I pack 5-pound bags of whole oranges. Do I need a metal detector? Do I need, do I need to do a risk assessment not to have a metal detector? No, but that's one of the unique things about BRC certification. Those of you who are certified to BRC know, those of you who have suppliers that are certified to BRC know this is why it's so important. Our standard doesn't allow you to risk assess your way out of doing the standard. Others do. You risk assess to identify the most effective, efficient methodology to meet the requirement, but you can't, based on risk assessment, say, I don't need to do this because there's no risk. It's in the standard because there is a risk, and for lesser or worse, but it's not allowed within the BRC to do a risk assessment to completely avoid meeting one of the requirements. So going back to where to find help, interpretation guide, key changes document, the FAQs, and the understanding guideline, all great documents for you to use, and you can get them on Participate, which you all have free access to. So now I am going to open up the chat to see if anybody has had any questions, and I don't see any right now, so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. If you have any additional questions you'd like answered, I'll do my best. It's always fun when you get put on the spot and try to come up with the right answer that someone's not going to hold against you at some point. But if I don't see any, and I don't have any at this point, if I don't see any, I'm going to thank you all very much. As I said, make sure you've got access to Participate. Look into Professional. I'd love to have you at the conference. Give us a shout. And by attending this, we will give you a discount thanks to Barry Johnson. Short of any questions, once again, I'm going to thank you all very much. If you do have any questions, send them on to Amy at Barry Johnson or myself, and we will get them answered. Have a great afternoon, everybody, and wish you all a Happy New Year.